You wake up before dawn, not because you want to, but because a foreman's stick is already cracking against your back. Your eyes haven't even adjusted to the darkness, and already you're being driven out of the cramped mud brick quarters you share with 40 other people. There's no time to think, no time to prepare yourself mentally for what's coming. The ancient Egyptian sun hasn't even risen yet, but your day as a slave has already begun, and it's going to be the longest, most brutal day of your life. Most people romanticize ancient Egypt. They think of golden treasures, mysterious pyramids, and powerful pharaohs. What they don't think about are the hundreds of thousands of slaves who built those monuments, who made that civilization possible. The slaves who were beaten, starved, worked to death, and forgotten by history. Today you're going to experience what it was really like, and I can tell you right now, you wouldn't make it past sunrise. Let me explain exactly why. Your first mistake is thinking you had any rest at all. What modern people call sleep and what you experienced last night are two completely different things. You were crammed into a worker's barracks with dozens of others, sleeping on a thin reed mat on the dirt floor. There were no pillows, no blankets, no privacy whatsoever. The temperature in the Egyptian desert drops dramatically at night. While tourists today experience Egypt's heat, they rarely experience its cold. At night, especially during certain seasons, temperatures can plummet to near freezing. You spent the night shivering, your body curled into a ball, trying desperately to conserve heat with nothing but the thin, filthy linen garment you're wearing. This garment, by the way, hasn't been washed in weeks. It's stiff with dried sweat, sand, and other substances you don't want to think about. But the cold wasn't your only problem. The quarters are infested. Lice crawl through your hair and over your scalp, biting constantly. Fleas jump from person to person, leaving itchy, infected welts all over your body. Rats scurry across the floor, occasionally running over your legs or face during the night. You've learned not to react anymore. Everyone has learned not to react. Some of the people sleeping around you are sick, very sick. You can hear them coughing throughout the night, a wet, rattling cough that speaks of serious respiratory infection. In the enclosed space, diseases spread like wildfire. Dysentery, typhoid, tuberculosis, various parasitic infections. They all circulate through the slave population constantly. The mortality rate is astronomical, but the pharaoh's projects must continue, so new slaves are brought in to replace those who die. It's a calculated, efficient system of human consumption. You barely slept 2 hours, maybe 3 if you were lucky. Your body aches from yesterday's work. Your muscles are stiff and sore. Your hands are covered in blisters, some fresh, some old and calloused, and some infected and oozing. Your back bears the marks of the overseer's whip from 3 days ago, raised welts that still sting when you move. And now, at 4:08 a.m., you're being driven out into the darkness. The foreman doesn't care that you're exhausted. He doesn't care that you're hungry. He doesn't care that you're a human being with limits and needs. To him, you're a tool that can be replaced if it breaks. And if you move too slowly, if you show any hesitation, that stick will come down again, harder this time. You stumble out into the pre-dawn darkness with the others. No one speaks. Speaking wastes energy, and you'll need every scrap of energy you have to survive today. The air is cold and you're shivering, but you know that in a few hours you'll be desperately wishing for this cold to return. You're herded to the ration distribution area. This is where you'll receive your food for the day, and when you see what's being handed out, your modern stomach is going to revolt. The staple food for slaves in ancient Egypt was bread and beer. That might sound fine to you, maybe even appealing, but this isn't the bread you're thinking of. This isn't some artisanal sourdough from a trendy bakery. This is the coarsest, most basic bread imaginable, made from barely processed grain that still contains husks, sand, and often small stones that didn't get filtered out during grinding. Each slave receives one small loaf, roughly the size of your fist. This bread is so hard and dense that you can't bite into it. You have to tear it with your hands and suck on pieces to soften them before you can chew. And when you do chew, you feel the grit of sand between your teeth. This sand, consumed day after day, year after year, grinds down the teeth of slaves until many are left with nothing but worn nubs by their 30s. The beer is even worse than you're imagining. Ancient Egyptian beer wasn't filtered or clarified like modern beer. It was thick, porridge-like, and full of sediment. It was also the primary safe source of hydration because drinking straight water from the Nile could kill you with any number of waterborne diseases. The beer is warm, sour, and has an alcohol content just high enough to help kill bacteria, but not high enough to provide any pleasant effect. It tastes like liquid bread mixed with mud. This is your breakfast: a fist-sized piece of sandy bread and a bowl of sludgy beer. This is also your lunch and your dinner, because you'll receive the same ration twice more today if you're lucky. The total caloric intake is perhaps 1,500 calories, maybe 2,000 on a good day. You're going to burn somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 calories doing the labor that's expected of you. Do the math. You're operating at a severe caloric deficit. Every single day, your body is consuming itself to make up the difference. You're losing weight constantly, and there's no weight to lose. Every slave around you is emaciated, their ribs clearly visible, their limbs thin and wasted. The overseer calls you well-fed if you can still walk without stumbling. That's his standard for adequate nutrition. You force down your ration as quickly as possible because the foremen are already shouting that it's time to move. The bread sits heavy in your stomach. Within an hour, you'll be desperately thirsty, but water won't come until midday if you're fortunate. Now comes the march. The worksite isn't conveniently located next to your barracks. It's miles away, and you're going to walk there in the darkness, stumbling over rocks and uneven ground. You're working on a pyramid. Maybe it's one of the great pyramids at Giza, or maybe it's a smaller monument for a lesser pharaoh. It doesn't matter. The work is the same. Brutal. Unending. Deadly. The march takes over an hour. You're walking in a column with hundreds of other slaves, guards on either side to make sure no one attempts to escape. Not that escape is really an option. Where would you go? The desert surrounds you on all sides. Without food, water, and protection from the sun, you die within a day. The guards know this. You know this. Escape isn't about getting away. It's about choosing your death. As you walk, the sky begins to lighten. First, a faint gray glow on the horizon. Then, gradually, the stars fade and the sky transitions from black to deep blue to lighter blue. You can start to see the landscape around you, sand and rock stretching to the horizon, the dark shape of the pyramid rising in the distance, a geometric mountain of stone that's growing larger day by day, built by hands just like yours. The temperature is starting to rise. It's subtle at first, but you can feel it. The cold night air is being replaced by something warmer. By the time you reach the work site, the sun will be rising and the real torture will begin. Your legs are already tired from the march, your empty stomach is cramping, you're thirsty. The gritty beer didn't really hydrate you properly, and you need water, but there's no water yet. First, there's work. You arrive at the work site just as the sun breaks over the horizon. The pyramid looms above you, already massive, though still far from complete. The site is a chaos of activity. Thousands of workers, most of them slaves like you, are moving like ants across the landscape. Some are hauling stones, some are cutting stones, some are setting stones into place, some are operating the ramps and levers that move the massive blocks into position. You're assigned to a hauling crew. This is arguably the worst job on the entire site. Your crew consists of 20 people. Your job is to move a single limestone block from the quarry to the pyramid. This block weighs approximately 2.5 tons. That's 5,000 pounds. For context, that's roughly the weight of a modern pickup truck. And you're going to move it using nothing but ropes, wooden sledges, and your bodies. The block sits on a wooden sledge. Ropes are attached to the sledge. Your crew lines up, and each person takes hold of a rope. The foreman stands behind you with his whip. An overseer stands ahead, shouting the rhythm. Pull, pull, pull! You lean forward, putting your full body weight into the rope. The rope is thick and rough, cutting into your hands even through the calluses. The entire crew strains together. For a moment, nothing happens. The sledge doesn't move. The block sits there, impossibly heavy, defying your efforts. The whip cracks. Someone in the line cries out. The foreman screams at you to pull harder. You pull harder. Your legs shake with the effort. Your back screams in protest. The muscles in your shoulders and arms are burning. And finally, slowly, the sledge begins to move. Inch by inch, foot by foot, the block slides forward across the sand. This is how you'll spend the next several hours, pulling, resting for 30 seconds, pulling again. over and over and over. The distance you need to cover is nearly half a mile. At the rate you're moving, it will take most of the day to move this single block. The sun is climbing higher now. It's getting hot, really hot. The temperature is rising toward 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and it will peak at around 110 or even 115 degrees in the full sun. There's no shade out here, no protection. You're completely exposed. Within the first hour, you're drenched in sweat. Your thin linen garment is soaked through. Sweat pours down your face, stinging your eyes, dripping off your nose and chin. You try to wipe it away, but you can't let go of the rope. If you let go, if your section of the rope goes slack, the entire crew's effort is compromised, and the foreman will notice. And when the foreman notices, the whip comes out. You've already seen what happens when someone can't keep up. Earlier, one of the men in your crew stumbled. He was weak, clearly sick with something. He fell to his knees, still holding the rope but unable to pull his weight. The foreman descended on him immediately. The whip came down across his back once, twice, 3 times. The man screamed and tried to get up, but his legs wouldn't support him. The foreman didn't stop. He kept whipping until the man either got up or died trying. Finally, somehow, the man found the strength to stand. He's back in line now, pulling with the rest of you, blood seeping through his garment where the whip broke skin. He won't last the day. You can see it in his eyes. He's already given up. He's just waiting for his body to catch up with his mind. It's been 3 hours since you started pulling, and the heat is becoming unbearable. The sun is still climbing, but it's already brutal. You're not just sweating anymore, you're being cooked alive. Your skin, which hasn't seen proper shade in months, is dark and weathered, but that doesn't protect you from the sun's assault. You can feel your face burning. Your scalp is burning under your short-cropped hair. The thin linen garment you're wearing provides almost no protection. The sun beats down on your back and shoulders with an almost physical weight. The dehydration is getting serious now. Your mouth is dry, your tongue feels thick and swollen, your lips are cracked and bleeding. Every breath of hot, dusty air feels like it's pulling more moisture from your body. You're becoming lightheaded. Your vision is starting to blur at the edges. You're not the only one struggling. You can see other slaves around the site in various stages of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Some are stumbling as they walk, clearly disoriented. Some have collapsed and are being dragged to the side by other workers. Some aren't moving at all. Their bodies left where they fell until someone has time to remove them. The overseers don't stop the work when someone collapses. They simply direct the remaining workers to compensate. If someone in your crew goes down, the rest of you have to pull harder. The block must keep moving. The pyramid must be built. Individual lives are irrelevant to the Pharaoh's eternal monument. You've been pulling for so long that you're moving on autopilot now. Pull, rest, pull, rest. Your mind has gone blank. You're not thinking anymore. You can't think. All your energy, all your focus is concentrated on the single task of pulling this rope and not collapsing. Your hands are bleeding. The rope has worn through your calluses and is now grinding directly into raw flesh. Blood mixes with sweat and drips down your arms. You can't feel the pain anymore, not really. It's just another sensation in a body that's completely overwhelmed with sensations of suffering. Around you, you can hear the sounds of thousands of other slaves engaged in similar tasks. The grinding of stone against stone, the thump of mallets hitting chisels, the creak of wooden levers and ramps, the shouts of overseers, the occasional scream of someone being punished, and underlying it all, a constant human drone of exhausted breathing and quiet suffering. Finally, mercifully, the foreman calls a halt. It's midday, the hottest part of the day, and even the overseers recognize that working through this heat would result in too many deaths. Dead slaves can't work, and there's a practical limit to how many you can afford to lose in a single day. You drop the rope and collapse where you stand. Your legs simply give out. You're on your knees in the sand, gasping for air, your vision swimming. Around you, the rest of your crew has collapsed as well. Everyone is down. Everyone is suffering. Water bearers move through the work site, distributing water from large clay jars. This is Nile water, the same water that's killed countless slaves with dysentery and other waterborne diseases. But you don't care. You're so desperately thirsty that you drink anything. When the water bearer reaches you, he pours water into a shared bowl. Your crew passes it around. When it reaches you, you grab it with shaking hands and drink. The water is warm and has a muddy taste. but it's the most delicious thing you've experienced in months. You want to gulp it all down, but you force yourself to drink slowly, knowing that drinking too quickly on an empty, overheated stomach will make you vomit. The bowl is passed to the next person. You didn't get nearly enough. You're still desperately thirsty. But that's all you're getting. The water must be rationed carefully. There are thousands of workers here and limited water supplies. Along with the water, you receive your midday food ration. It's the same as breakfast. A small piece of bread and a bowl of thick beer. You eat mechanically, without pleasure, simply fueling your body for the afternoon's work. The break lasts perhaps 30 minutes. It's not enough. You need hours to recover from the morning's work. You need shade, more water, real food, medical attention. You need rest, but you're not going to get any of that. All around you, the more severely affected slaves are lying motionless. Some are unconscious, some are awake but unresponsive, staring blankly at nothing. A few have died, their bodies already stiffening in the heat. Workers move among them, checking for signs of life, dragging away those who won't be returning to work. You watch as they drag away the man who was whipped earlier. He's not moving. His eyes are open but empty. He made it through the morning, but the midday heat finished him. By tonight, he'll be buried in a mass grave in the desert, unmarked and forgotten. In a few weeks, no one will remember he existed. This could be you by the end of the day. Probably will be you within a few weeks or months if you're unlucky enough to be assigned to this kind of labor long term. The life expectancy of a pyramid construction slave is measured in months, not years. The break is over. The foreman is shouting again. Everyone must return to work. You struggle to your feet, your legs shaking, barely able to support your weight. The heat is at its peak now. It's well over 110 degrees, possibly pushing 115. The sun is directly overhead, beating down with savage intensity. You take your place on the rope again. Your bleeding hands grip the coarse fibers. The foreman cracks his whip to signal the start. And you begin pulling again. The afternoon is worse than the morning, so much worse. Your body has nothing left to give, but the work continues regardless. Every movement is agony. Your muscles are screaming. Your joints feel like they're grinding bone on bone. Your heart is racing, trying desperately to cool your overheated body. But there's no way to cool down. The heat is inside you now, cooking you from within. You're experiencing the early stages of heat stroke. Your body temperature is rising above safe levels. Your brain is starting to malfunction. You're seeing things that aren't there, shimmers in the air that look like water, shadows that look like people, brief flashes of movement at the edge of your vision. You're becoming confused, disoriented. Time loses meaning. Are you still pulling? Have you stopped? You can't remember. Someone is screaming. You realize distantly that it's you. You're screaming as you pull, a wordless cry of pure agony and desperation. Other slaves are screaming too. The overseers ignore it. Screaming is normal. Everyone screams eventually. The block inches forward. Your crew is down to 18 people now. 2 collapsed and couldn't get up. The remaining 18 are pulling with the strength of 20. It's impossible, but you're doing it anyway. Because the alternative is the whip, or death. And in your current state, you're not sure which would be worse. You've stopped sweating. This is a very bad sign, though you don't understand the medical implications. Your body has run out of moisture to spare. You're severely dehydrated now, moving into dangerous territory. Your skin is hot and dry. Your core temperature is climbing. You need immediate medical attention, but there is no medical attention. There are no doctors for slaves. There's only work. Your vision narrows to a tunnel. You can see the rope in your hands, can see the sand beneath your feet, but everything else is darkness, closing in from the edges. You're going to pass out. You can feel it coming. Your body is shutting down, trying to protect itself from the heat and exhaustion by forcing you into unconsciousness. But if you pass out, you'll be whipped. If you don't get up after being whipped, you'll be left to die. You've seen it happen to others. The overseers don't waste resources on slaves who can't work. You're only valuable as long as you can pull your weight. The moment you become useless, you're discarded, so you stay on your feet. Somehow, impossibly, you keep pulling. Your body is running on pure survival instinct now. Your conscious mind has mostly shut down. You're operating on a deeper, more primitive level. Pull, breathe, don't fall. Pull, breathe, don't fall. After what feels like an eternity, your crew finally delivers the stone to the pyramid's base. But your work isn't done. Now you have to help position it. The stone must be moved up a ramp to the current level of the pyramid. The ramps are long, sloping paths made of packed dirt, mud bricks, and stone rubble. They're the only way to get the massive blocks to the upper levels of the structure. Your crew positions the sledge at the bottom of the ramp. Other crews join you. Now there are 40 people on the ropes because moving the stone up an incline requires even more force than moving it across level ground. The ramp is steep, the surface is rough. As you pull, the sledge constantly wants to slide backward. If the ropes were to break, if the crew were to lose control, the stone would slide back down the ramp, crushing anyone in its path. This happens occasionally. You've seen it. Bodies broken and flattened by multi-ton stones, scraped off the ramp and disposed of like trash. You pull. The stone rises. Foot by foot, you drag it up the ramp. The angle makes everything harder. You're not just pulling forward now, you're pulling upward, fighting gravity. Your legs burn with the effort of climbing while pulling. Your back feels like it's about to snap. Halfway up the ramp, someone loses their grip. The rope slips through their hands. The sudden shift in weight distribution causes the stone to lurch. Everyone stumbles. For a terrible moment, the stone tilts, threatens to slide backward. People scream, but somehow, the remaining workers hold on. The stone steadies. The fallen worker is immediately replaced by someone from a different crew, and the pull continues. You reach the top of the ramp. The stone must now be positioned precisely, fitted into its designated spot in the pyramid structure. This requires levers, smaller stones used as wedges, and careful maneuvering. You're not directly involved in this part. Your job was to deliver the stone. Now you must return to the quarry and get another one, and another, until the day is done. On your third trip of the day, disaster strikes your crew. You're halfway through transporting another stone when one of the wooden rollers under the sledge breaks. The sledge lurches, tilts, and the stone slides off, crashing to the ground with a tremendous impact that you feel through the soles of your feet. The stone is now on the ground, off the sledge, half buried in sand. This is catastrophic. Getting it back onto the sledge is going to require additional crews, additional equipment, and a tremendous amount of extra work. The foreman explodes in rage. This is a massive delay, and delays are unacceptable. The pharaoh's pyramid must be completed on schedule. Any setback reflects badly on the overseers, who will face consequences from their superiors. The foreman needs someone to blame, needs to make an example. His whip comes out, and he begins laying into the nearest slaves with savage fury. You're close, but not closest. 3 people between you and him take the punishment. The whip rises and falls, rises and falls. One man goes down after the 3rd strike. The foreman kicks him until he gets up. The man's back is a mess of opened welts, bleeding freely. While the foreman is beating these men, other overseers are shouting orders, organizing additional crews to help retrieve the fallen stone. You're pulled into this effort along with dozens of other slaves. The process takes hours. The stone must be levered up using wooden beams. The sledge must be repaired. The stone must be carefully repositioned onto the repaired sledge. All of this in the brutal afternoon heat, with no additional food or water provided despite the extra effort. By the time the stone is back on the sledge and moving again, the sun is beginning to lower toward the horizon. You've been working for nearly 12 hours straight. Your body is destroying itself. You're running on nothing but adrenaline and fear. As the sun approaches the horizon, the temperature begins to drop slightly. It's still over 90 degrees, still brutally hot by any reasonable standard. But compared to the midday inferno, it feels almost cool. But you're not done yet. Each crew has a quota. A certain number of stones must be moved each day. If the quota isn't met, the entire crew is punished. Because of the equipment failure, your crew is behind. You're going to be working past sunset to make up the difference. Your body has nothing left. You're beyond exhausted, beyond pain. You're in a state that's difficult to describe to someone who's never experienced it. A kind of mobile death, where your body keeps moving even though it should have shut down hours ago. You can barely stand. Your legs shake constantly. You've fallen 3 times in the last hour, and each time, you've forced yourself back up through sheer terror of what will happen if you don't. The whip is a constant threat, a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Other crews are finishing their work, heading back to the barracks. You watch them go with desperate envy. but your crew must continue. The overseers don't care about fairness. They care about quotas and schedules. The sun sets. The sky turns orange, then red, then purple. Stars begin to appear. The temperature drops further. You're still pulling. Torches are lit around the worksite. You continue working by torchlight, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows across the sand and stone. The pyramid looms above you, a black geometric mass against the darkening sky. A monument to the pharaoh's ego, built with your blood and the blood of thousands like you. Finally, mercifully, as the last light fades from the sky, your crew completes the quota. The foreman counts the stones, verifies the number, and dismisses you. You've delivered 4 stones today. 4 stones out of the millions that will be required to complete the pyramid. Your entire day of suffering resulted in moving 4 stones. The march back to the barracks is a nightmare. You're so exhausted that you can barely walk. Your feet drag through the sand. You stumble constantly. Several times, you nearly fall, and only the press of bodies around you keeps you upright. It's dark now. The stars are out in full force, millions of them painting the desert sky. In any other circumstance, it would be beautiful. Right now, you barely notice. You're focused entirely on putting one foot in front of the other. The guards don't push as hard during the return march. They know the slaves are exhausted. Pushing too hard would result in deaths, and while individual slaves are expendable, you can't lose too many in one day. There are limits even to how callously the overseers can treat their workforce. The march takes longer than the morning journey because everyone is moving slowly. It's full dark by the time you see the barracks in the distance, torches marking their location. Back at the barracks, you receive your final ration of the day. More bread, more beer, the same poor quality, barely sufficient food you've been eating all day. You eat mechanically, too tired to taste anything. Your hands are shaking so badly that you nearly drop the bread. The beer makes you feel slightly nauseous, but you force it down because it's the only hydration you're going to get. Around you, slaves are tending to their injuries as best they can with no medical supplies. The man who was whipped this morning is cleaning his wounds with water from a communal bucket. The water is dirty, and the wounds will almost certainly become infected. But it's better than nothing. You look at your own hands. They're a mess. The palms are raw, bleeding, covered in a mixture of blood, sand, and rope fiber. Several blisters have popped and are weeping clear fluid. One looks like it might already be infected, red and swollen around the edges. There's nothing you can do about it. Tomorrow, you'll grip the rope with these same damaged hands and they'll bleed again, and the damage will get worse. This is simply the reality of your existence. You return to your spot in the barracks, to your thin reed mat on the dirt floor. Your body is screaming for rest, but real rest is impossible here. The pain is overwhelming now that you're not moving. Your back, shoulders, arms, and legs are all cramping. Your muscles are in spasm, tightening and releasing randomly. You try to stretch, but movement only makes the pain worse. You're desperately hungry despite the rations. Your body burned thousands of calories today and received only a fraction of what it needs. Your stomach is cramping, empty, gnawing at itself. You're still dehydrated. The water and beer you received wasn't nearly enough to replace what you lost to sweat. Your head is pounding. Your tongue is thick and dry. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. You lie down on your mat, and immediately the cold begins seeping into your overheated body. The temperature has dropped significantly now that the sun is down. Within an hour, you'll be shivering. Around you, other slaves are coughing, moaning, crying quietly. The sounds of human suffering are the lullaby you fall asleep to every night, assuming you can fall asleep at all. You close your eyes and try to rest. In 6 hours, maybe 7 if you're lucky, the foreman will come through with his stick again, and the entire ordeal will repeat. And the day after that, and the day after that, for months or years, until your body finally gives out and you die, just another nameless slave buried in the desert. This was one day. One single day in the life of a slave building a pyramid in ancient Egypt. And the truth is, what I've described is probably optimistic. I didn't mention the chronic diseases that plagued slaves, the parasitic infections from contaminated water, the respiratory diseases from breathing stone dust all day, the malnutrition-related illnesses, the infected wounds that turned septic. I didn't fully describe the beatings, which were constant and severe. Overseers used whips, sticks, and fists freely. Slaves were considered property, and damaging property was acceptable if it increased productivity. I didn't detail the psychological torture of living without hope, without freedom, without any prospect of escape or improvement. The knowledge that you would likely die doing this work, that your life had no value to anyone, that you existed solely to serve the pharaoh's ambition. I didn't explore the sexual violence that female slaves faced, the way they were used and abused by overseers and guards with complete impunity. I didn't discuss the children born into slavery, who began working as soon as they could walk, who never knew anything but this life of suffering. I didn't explain the complete lack of legal recourse or protection. If an overseer killed you, there were no consequences. Your life was worth less than the cost of the whip used to beat you. From your modern perspective, you're used to labor laws, safety regulations, workers' rights, unions, and legal protections. You're used to 8-hour workdays, lunch breaks, weekends, paid time off, health insurance, and OSHA standards. You're used to having value as a human being, having rights, having the ability to quit a job you don't like. You're used to being paid for your work, being able to purchase food and shelter, having some degree of control over your life. None of that exists in ancient Egypt. You're not a worker, you're a slave. You have no rights, no protections, no value beyond your ability to perform labor. Your life can be ended at any moment for any reason or no reason at all, and no one would care. The modern person reading this probably can't truly comprehend what this means, can't really understand what it feels like to be property, to know that your suffering doesn't matter to anyone, that you're completely powerless and helpless. You might think you understand poverty, or difficult working conditions, or physical labor. But unless you've experienced true slavery, you don't understand. You can't understand. The gap between modern life and ancient slavery is too vast. Let's talk about physical fitness for a moment. The average modern person is dramatically less physically capable than would be required for this work. Most people today live sedentary lifestyles. We sit at desks, drive cars, use elevators, and generally avoid hard physical labor whenever possible. Even people who exercise regularly, who go to gyms and lift weights, are not conditioned for the kind of sustained, brutal physical work that pyramid construction required. A modern bodybuilder, someone who looks strong and muscular, would likely collapse within hours, because gym strength and work capacity are completely different things. The bodybuilder can lift heavy weights for short periods with rest between sets. That's not what pyramid construction required. It required sustained effort over 12 or 14 hours, day after day, on inadequate food and water. Endurance athletes might fare better. Marathoners, ultra runners, CrossFit competitors. But even they would struggle with the caloric deficit, the heat, the dehydration, and the sustained nature of the work. And most importantly, they would lack the mental toughness that comes from a lifetime of having no other choice. The slaves who survived weren't necessarily the strongest or the most physically fit. They were the ones who could mentally endure the suffering, who could disassociate from their pain, who could keep working when every fiber of their being was screaming to stop. This isn't a skill you develop at the gym. It's a survival adaptation that develops only under conditions of extreme duress. You have no access to modern medicine. None. Zero. Not even basic first aid as we understand it. When you're injured, and you will be injured constantly, there's no treatment beyond whatever folk remedies other slaves might know. That infected wound on your hand, in the modern world, you'd clean it with antiseptic, apply antibiotic ointment, and cover it with a sterile bandage. In ancient Egypt as a slave, you have none of these things. You might rinse it with water if water is available. That's it. The wound will likely become more infected. If you're unlucky, the infection will spread up your arm. If you're very unlucky, you'll develop sepsis and die within days, delirious with fever, your body shutting down as the infection overwhelms your immune system. Broken bones? There are no doctors for slaves. If you break a bone, it will heal on its own, if you're lucky, probably misaligned, leaving you with permanent disability. More likely, you won't be able to work while it heals, which means you won't receive rations, which means you'll starve to death before the bone has a chance to knit together. Dental problems? Remember that sandy bread you're eating every day? It's grinding your teeth down to nubs. When your teeth decay, and they will decay because you have no dental hygiene, the pain is excruciating. There's no dentist, no pain medication. You just suffer. If an abscess develops, the infection can spread to your jaw, your bloodstream, your brain. Dental infections kill people in the ancient world with disturbing regularity. Parasitic infections are endemic. The water you're drinking from the Nile is full of parasites. Schistosomiasis, a parasitic disease caused by flatworms, is probably infecting you right now if you've been drinking Nile water for any length of time. The parasites burrow into your skin when you wade into the water, travel through your bloodstream, and eventually settle in your intestines or bladder. There they lay eggs, causing internal bleeding, organ damage, and intense pain. The disease is chronic and debilitating. It will slowly destroy your body from the inside. You're also likely infected with intestinal worms, tapeworms, roundworms, hookworms. These parasites compete with you for nutrients, making your already inadequate diet even less effective. They cause abdominal pain, diarrhea, weakness, and anemia. In severe cases, they can cause intestinal blockages or perforate your intestinal wall, leading to peritonitis and death. Dysentery is a constant threat. With contaminated water and poor sanitation, outbreaks sweep through the slave population regularly. When you develop dysentery, you experience severe diarrhea, often bloody, along with intense abdominal cramping. You become rapidly dehydrated. Without proper treatment and rehydration, dysentery can kill you within days. Even if you survive, the damage to your intestines can be permanent. Respiratory diseases are rampant. You're breathing stone dust all day as stones are cut and shaped. This dust accumulates in your lungs, causing a condition similar to what we now call silicosis. Your lungs become scarred and stiff. Breathing becomes progressively more difficult. You develop a chronic cough. Eventually, your damaged lungs fail to oxygenate your blood properly, and you suffocate slowly over months or years. Heat stroke, which you're flirting with every single day, causes permanent brain damage if you survive it. Multiple episodes of heat stroke, which you would certainly experience over weeks and months of this work, lead to cumulative cognitive impairment. Your ability to think clearly, to remember things, to coordinate your movements, all of this degrades over time. Malnutrition causes a cascade of health problems. With inadequate calories, protein, vitamins, and minerals, your body begins to break down. Your immune system weakens, making you susceptible to every infection. Your muscles waste away despite the constant work. Your bones become brittle. Your skin develops sores that won't heal. Your hair falls out. Your gums bleed. In severe cases, you develop diseases like scurvy or beriberi, which cause additional suffering and disability. The psychological toll is immense as well. We now understand PTSD, depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. You would be suffering from all of these, compounded by the fact that there's no escape, no treatment, no hope of improvement. The constant stress, fear, and trauma would fundamentally alter your brain chemistry. Many slaves probably existed in a dissociated state, mentally detached from their bodies as a coping mechanism, going through the motions of work without really being present. The hierarchy of suffering in ancient Egypt was complex and brutal. You, as a pyramid construction slave, are at the absolute bottom. But it's worth understanding the full social structure to appreciate just how powerless you are. At the top is the pharaoh, considered a living god. His word is absolute law. If he wants a pyramid, he gets a pyramid, regardless of the human cost. The pharaoh doesn't see you as human. You're a resource, like the limestone being quarried or the wood being imported for scaffolding. Below the pharaoh are the priests and nobles, who administer the kingdom and oversee major projects like pyramid construction. They're the ones who organize the logistics, determine the work schedules, and set the quotas. They see you as a number in an accounting ledger. Below them are the overseers and foremen, the men who directly control your daily life. These are the men with the whips, the men who determine whether you eat or starve, live or die. Some of them are former slaves themselves who earned positions of authority through years of service or by betraying other slaves. They're often the cruelest because they know what it's like to be in your position, and they're desperately afraid of falling back into it. There are also skilled workers on the pyramid site, stonemasons, engineers, architects. Some of these are free men, paid for their expertise. They're not slaves, though their working conditions aren't great either. But they have rights you don't have. They can leave. They can refuse work. They have some value beyond their labor. Then there are other categories of slaves. Domestic slaves who work in wealthy households have it much better than you do. They're fed better, housed better, and rarely beaten because damaging a domestic slave reduces their value. Agricultural slaves work in the fields, which is brutal labor but not as immediately deadly as pyramid construction. You would trade places with any of them in a heartbeat. And at the very bottom, there's you. A construction slave, expendable, replaceable, worthless. This hierarchy is enforced through violence and fear. You can't appeal to anyone for better treatment, because everyone above you benefits from your suffering. The entire system is designed to extract maximum labor from you before you die, then replace you with another slave. It's efficient, ruthless, and has been refined over generations. Let's talk about the scale of what's being built, because understanding the numbers helps you understand why the human cost was so astronomical. The Great Pyramid of Giza contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. Each block weighs an average of 2.5 tons. The total weight of the pyramid is around 6.5 million tons. Current estimates suggest the Great Pyramid took approximately 20 years to build. That means, on average, workers had to place roughly 300 blocks per day, every single day, for 20 years straight. Think about what you did today. You and your crew of 20 people spent an entire day moving 4 blocks. And that was considered adequate productivity that met the quota. Now imagine this happening every single day for 2 decades. Thousands of workers moving thousands of blocks in heat that regularly exceeds 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The logistical coordination alone is staggering. Quarrying the stones, transporting them, cutting and shaping them, moving them into position, fitting them precisely. And the Great Pyramid is just one of dozens of pyramids built over Egyptian history. Each one represents decades of work, thousands or tens of thousands of workers, and countless deaths. The human cost of these monuments is incalculable. We have no accurate records of how many slaves died building the pyramids. Estimates vary wildly, from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands or more. The dead were buried in mass graves in the desert, unmarked and forgotten. When you visit Egypt today as a tourist, when you stand before the pyramids and marvel at their size and precision, you're looking at monuments built with human suffering on a scale that's difficult to comprehend. Every single block represents hours of brutal labor. Every level of the pyramid represents months of work. The entire structure represents decades of systematic human exploitation. Who were these slaves? Where did they come from? Understanding this adds another layer of horror to the situation. Some slaves were prisoners of war. Egypt's military campaigns brought in thousands of captives who were enslaved and put to work. You might be a Nubian warrior who was captured in battle, or a Libyan tribesman taken in a raid, or a Syrian soldier who fought against Egypt and lost. Your entire life, your identity, your family, your freedom was stripped away in an instant, and now you're here, pulling ropes until you die. Some slaves were born into slavery. Their parents were slaves, and so they are slaves. They've never known freedom. This is all they've ever experienced. In some ways, they might be better adapted to this life simply because they have no frame of reference for anything else. But the tragedy of a life spent entirely in bondage, never experiencing even a moment of freedom, is profound. Some slaves were criminals or debtors. In ancient Egypt, certain crimes could be punished with enslavement, and people who couldn't pay their debts could be sold into slavery to settle their accounts. You might have been a free Egyptian citizen who made a mistake, failed to pay a tax, or crossed the wrong person politically, and now you're here. Some slaves were simply kidnapped or purchased from slave traders who operated throughout the ancient world. Slavers raided villages, took captives, and sold them to whoever would pay. You might have been a farmer tending your fields when raiders came, or a merchant traveling on a road, or a child playing near your home. And now you're here. The slave population was diverse, speaking many languages, coming from many cultures. This diversity was actually a tool of control. When slaves can't communicate effectively with each other, they can't organize, can't plan resistance, can't support each other as effectively. The overseers understood this and deliberately mixed different groups together. You might be wondering, why didn't the slaves rebel? With thousands of slaves at a work site, why didn't they overwhelm the guards and escape? The answer is complex and reveals the sophisticated nature of the control system. First, there's the simple fact of geography. The work site is in the middle of the desert. Where would you run? Even if you somehow escape the guards, you're days away from any settlement, with no food, no water, and no knowledge of the terrain. The desert itself is a prison more effective than any walls. Second, there's the matter of conditioning and exhaustion. When you're worked to the point of collapse every single day, when you're malnourished and sick and barely surviving, you don't have the energy to plan a rebellion. Revolution requires organization, planning, and energy that you simply don't have. You're using every bit of strength just to survive the day. Third, there's the systematic breaking of the human spirit, the constant violence, the arbitrary nature of punishment, the complete powerlessness. All of this is designed to break you psychologically. After weeks or months of this treatment, most people enter a state of learned helplessness. They stop fighting because they've learned that fighting is futile. They simply endure because endurance is the only option left. Fourth, there's the matter of collective punishment. If one person attempts escape or attacks a guard, the entire crew is punished. Maybe they're all whipped. Maybe they all lose their rations for days. Maybe 1 in 10 is executed as an example. This system makes every slave responsible for controlling every other slave. You're not just afraid of the guards. You're afraid of what your fellow slaves might do that would result in your punishment. Fifth, there were occasional examples made of those who did resist. Public executions, brutal tortures, drawn-out deaths designed to instill maximum fear in the watching slaves. These examples were effective. They reminded everyone what would happen if you stepped out of line. That said, resistance did happen, though rarely and usually unsuccessfully. Small acts of sabotage, moving more slowly than necessary, accidentally damaging equipment, helping sick slaves hide their condition. Larger acts of resistance usually ended in death for everyone involved. The occasional suicide, which was a form of resistance in its own right, taking away from the pharaoh the one thing you could still control: your life. Let's do a direct comparison between your worst day of work in the modern world and this single day as a slave in ancient Egypt. Your worst modern workday probably involves some combination of a difficult boss, long hours, frustrating tasks, maybe some conflict with coworkers, stress about deadlines, perhaps physical tiredness if your job involves manual labor. At the end of that terrible modern workday, you went home. Maybe you complained to a friend or family member. Maybe you had a beer or a glass of wine to unwind. You ate dinner, real food, properly cooked, nutritious. You took a hot shower. You slept in a bed with a mattress, pillows, and blankets. You had a roof over your head, climate control, and security. The next day, if you really couldn't stand it anymore, you could quit. You could look for another job. You had options. Now, compare that to this day as an Egyptian slave. You were beaten awake before dawn. You received barely enough food to keep you alive. You spent 14 hours doing backbreaking labor in extreme heat with inadequate water. You were constantly threatened with violence and death. You witnessed people die around you. You sustained injuries that will never properly heal. You have no hope of escape, no prospect of improvement, no reason to believe tomorrow will be any better. And when you finally got to rest, it wasn't really rest, just a few hours of fitful sleep on the ground before the cycle begins again. Your worst day doesn't compare. It can't compare. The gap between modern workplace difficulties and ancient slavery is a chasm so vast that attempting to bridge it with comparison almost feels disrespectful to those who suffered through the real thing. One of the things that made pyramid construction so brutal was the primitive state of technology. Modern construction uses cranes, trucks, power tools, and sophisticated engineering. Ancient Egypt had ropes, wood, and human muscle. Consider how we would move a 2.5-ton stone today. A modern crane could lift it easily. A flatbed truck could transport it. The entire operation might take a few hours with a crew of 3 or 4 people operating machinery. In ancient Egypt, that same stone required 20 people pulling on ropes for an entire day, plus additional people managing the sledge and rollers, plus overseers coordinating the effort. And this was actually an efficient system for the technology available. There wasn't a better way to do it with the tools they had. The pyramids are often cited as evidence of ancient Egyptian engineering genius, and that's true. The precision of the construction, the mathematical sophistication, the logistical coordination, all impressive. But this genius was built on a foundation of human suffering. The engineering solutions they developed were solutions to the problem of how to move massive stones using human power. And the answer was, use a lot of humans, work them brutally hard, and accept that many of them will die in the process. It's important to understand the religious context because it helps explain how this system was justified and maintained. The pharaoh was considered a god, or at least a divine intermediary between the gods and humans. The pyramid wasn't just a tomb, it was a sacred structure that would ensure the pharaoh's successful journey to the afterlife and, by extension, the continued prosperity of Egypt. From the Egyptian religious perspective, building the pyramid was a holy duty. Even the suffering of the slaves could be framed as service to the gods, as participation in a sacred task that was essential for cosmic order. Of course, this religious framing was much more comforting for the free Egyptians than for the slaves doing the actual suffering, but it provided an ideological justification for the system. The pyramid had to be built because the gods demanded it. The pharaoh's afterlife had to be secured because he was divine. Individual suffering was irrelevant in the face of these cosmic imperatives. This is a pattern we see throughout history. Religious or ideological beliefs used to justify exploitation and suffering. The people benefiting from the system develop narratives that make the system seem necessary, even righteous. And these narratives are enforced through both ideological conditioning and physical violence. Let's talk about the economics of pyramid construction, because understanding the economic incentives helps explain why the system was so brutal. From the pharaoh's perspective, pyramid construction was an investment in his afterlife, but it was also a massive economic undertaking that consumed enormous resources. The stone had to be quarried, the workers had to be fed, even if inadequately. Tools had to be manufactured. Administrative systems had to be created and maintained. The cheapest way to get labor was slavery. Slaves don't require wages. They can be fed the minimum necessary to keep them working. They can be housed in the cheapest possible conditions. They can be worked until they die and then replaced. From a purely economic standpoint, the optimal strategy was to extract maximum labor from each slave at minimum cost, accepting that this would result in the high mortality. As long as new slaves could be acquired through war or trade more cheaply than the cost of keeping existing slaves healthy and alive long term, the system made economic sense. This is the horrifying logic of slavery as an economic institution. Human beings become factors in an equation, valued only for their productive capacity, and discarded when that capacity is exhausted. The Egyptian economy was sophisticated enough to support this system at scale. There were supply chains for food production and distribution. There were systems for acquiring and transporting slaves. There were administrative hierarchies to manage the workforce. The entire society was organized around projects like pyramid construction, and slavery was the foundation that made it all possible. There's an ongoing debate among historians about whether some pyramid workers were actually paid free laborers rather than slaves. Some evidence suggests that certain skilled workers were compensated and worked voluntarily. But here's the important distinction. Even if some workers were free and paid, the evidence is clear that a large portion of the workforce consisted of slaves and forced laborers. The existence of some free workers doesn't negate the suffering of the enslaved workers, and even the free workers often weren't truly free in the modern sense. They might have been peasants fulfilling labor obligations to the state, essentially a form of corvée labor. During certain seasons when agricultural work was impossible, like the Nile flood season, peasants were required to work on state projects. While they might have been better treated than slaves and received some compensation, they didn't have a choice about whether to work. Refusing would have resulted in punishment. So, when we talk about pyramid construction, we're not talking about a system where everyone was a willing participant. We're talking about a system built primarily on forced labor, whether that force came in the form of outright slavery or compulsory state service. Archaeologists have excavated workers' villages near pyramid sites. The evidence they've found corroborates the brutal conditions described above. Skeletal remains show evidence of severe physical trauma. Broken bones that healed poorly, or not at all. Degenerative joint disease consistent with heavy labor. Dental wear from sandy bread, nutritional deficiencies, and often premature death. The living quarters were cramped and inadequate. The tools were primitive. The medical facilities were minimal or non-existent for the lower-class workers. Some graves contain multiple bodies buried together without ceremony or grave goods, consistent with mass burial of slaves or low-status workers who died during construction. The archaeological evidence paints a picture of a large population of workers living in harsh conditions, working with inadequate nutrition and medical care, suffering high rates of injury and death. This is entirely consistent with large-scale use of slave labor for construction. Let's talk about what this does to your mind, because the psychological torture is in many ways worse than the physical torture. You wake up every morning knowing that today will be terrible. You know you'll be in pain. You know you'll be hungry and thirsty. You know there's a chance you'll be beaten. You know there's a chance you'll die. And you know that there's nothing you can do about any of it. This creates a state of constant severe anxiety and stress. Your body is flooded with stress hormones continuously. This has devastating effects on your physical and mental health over time. You're experiencing trauma every single day, witnessing violence, experiencing violence, living in constant fear. All of this causes complex PTSD. Your brain is fundamentally changed by this sustained trauma. You become hypervigilant, always watching for threats. You have difficulty feeling positive emotions. You might dissociate, feeling disconnected from your body and your experiences as a coping mechanism. The complete lack of control over your life is psychologically devastating. Humans need some sense of agency, some feeling that their choices matter. When every aspect of your life is controlled by others, when you have no choices at all, it breaks something fundamental in your psyche. The absence of hope might be the worst part. If you could believe that things would get better, that you might earn freedom, that there was some light at the end of the tunnel, you could endure almost anything. But there is no hope. You're going to be a slave until you die, which probably won't be long now. Every day is the same, and every day will continue to be the same until your body gives out. This hopelessness leads to depression so severe that many slaves likely welcome death when it finally can. Let's get personal for a moment. Why wouldn't you, specifically as a modern person reading this, survive even one day? First, your body isn't prepared. Unless you're a professional athlete or someone who does heavy manual labor for a living, your muscles, joints, and cardiovascular system are not conditioned for this level of physical exertion. Within the first hour, you'd be experiencing muscle failure. Within the first few hours, you'd be at serious risk of heat stroke, dehydration, and cardiovascular collapse. Second, your pain tolerance isn't developed. Modern life has made you soft, which is actually a good thing. You've never had to push through extreme pain for hours on end. When you experience serious pain, you stop the activity and seek treatment. You've never had to keep working while in agony, because stopping would result in being beaten or killed. Third, your mental toughness isn't there. You've never experienced true hopelessness and helplessness. You've never had to function while knowing you have zero control over your situation and zero prospect of escape. This level of psychological distress would likely cause you to shut down mentally, becoming catatonic or actively seeking death to escape the suffering. Fourth, your immune system isn't adapted. Modern hygiene and medicine have made your immune system, in some ways, weaker than ancient peoples. Exposure to the parasites, bacteria, and viruses that were endemic in ancient Egypt would likely make you severely ill very quickly. Fifth, your nutrition has been too good. That sounds like a strange criticism, but it's true. Your body is accustomed to regular, adequate meals with complete nutrition. Suddenly dropping to starvation rations would cause your body to go into crisis. You'd experience severe hunger pangs, weakness, inability to concentrate, and rapid weight loss that would compromise your ability to work. Sixth, you're psychologically unprepared for violence. Unless you've experienced serious violence personally, you probably can't imagine what it's really like to be beaten. The first time the overseer's whip comes down on your back, the shock and pain would likely cause you to collapse. You've never had to keep working while being actively hurt. This would break you almost immediately. So let's return to the question. Could you survive one day as a slave in ancient Egypt? The answer is almost certainly no. You wouldn't survive the physical labor. Euphoricus, body would give out. Heat stroke, dehydration, exhaustion, cardiac event. Something would fail. You'd collapse, and if you couldn't get back up, you'd be left to die. Even if your body somehow held together, your mind probably wouldn't. The psychological trauma of that first day would be so severe that you'd be permanently changed, assuming you lived through it. And that's just one day. Imagine months of this. Years. That's what slaves endured. That's the reality of building the pyramids. When you see images of the pyramids, when you read about ancient Egypt's achievements, remember this. Remember that these monuments were built with human blood and suffering on a scale that's difficult for modern people to comprehend. The pyramids stand as testament to human achievement, yes, but they also stand as testament to human cruelty, to the capacity of people to inflict tremendous suffering on other people in pursuit of power and legacy. The slaves who built these structures are mostly forgotten now. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories. They died and were buried in unmarked graves in the sand, and history moved on without them. But they were real people. They suffered and died to build these monuments, and understanding their experience, understanding what it really meant to be a slave in ancient Egypt is important. It helps us appreciate not just the monuments themselves, but the human cost of building them. It reminds us of the importance of human rights, of workers' protections, of the fundamental dignity that every human being deserves. It reminds us how far we've come, and how easily we could slip backward if we're not vigilant about protecting those rights and that dignity. You wouldn't survive one day as a slave in ancient Egypt. Neither would most people. And that's exactly the point. The conditions were designed to extract maximum labor before death, and they were horrifyingly effective at doing exactly that. The pyramids remain. The slaves are gone, forgotten, except as anonymous statistics. But their suffering was real, their lives mattered, and their story deserves to be told. Opening